Hi, it's Justin Coletti of Sonic Scoop, and welcome back for some more MixCon 2023. This time we've got a workshop with James Ivey, longtime producer, engineer, and educator in the audio space, and he's going to be taking us through a tour of the new native plugins from Antelope Audio to show us what they can do. If you're not familiar with Antelope Audio, they make amazing hardware, but they've also been making amazing plugins for years and years, and now finally you're able to run them natively inside your DAW on the processing power of your computer instead of being tethered to Antelope Audio hardware with them. They make some great sounding stuff, a lot of it modeled after really interesting classic analog gear. And the whole set of tools has some of the usual favorites, but also some more unusual analog modeled hardware that you're not likely to find from any other brands. Without further ado, let's jump right into James's workshop where he's going to take us through these Antelope Audio plugins and show us how he uses them and what they can do. James, take it away.
Thanks, Justin, and hi everyone. My name is James Ivey, and welcome to my MixCon 2023 presentation for Antelope Audio. What I have is a Pro Tools session by an artist called Benjamin Bloom, a British singer-songwriter, piano player, and he and I have been working together for many, many years. And I thought what I'd do is take you through this session using 3 different varieties of Antelope Audio plugin that get us to the same place, but I thought it's kind of the story and the development of the Antelope Audio effects platform. And it's quite interesting that there's quite a lot of misconception about the Antelope Audio platform, or platforms as it is. So I thought as we go through the mix, we'll dive in and touch on some of the kind of the pain points that have arisen as we've gone through, and just show you some of the latest technology the guys at Antelope have developed and how easy it is to use, and hopefully you enjoy it along the way. Have a listen to the track as it is at the moment. This is kind of probably 90% there for me. I'm not a massively heavy plugin user. I'm a great believer at getting it right at source. So right instrument, right mics, right tonality of that instrument, right mic pre's, all that sort of stuff. I want to get it to tape correctly. And then the mix is kind of like the seasoning and the secret sauce. So have a listen, and then we can talk about some of the elements of the mix. We'll spend some time on the drums, because obviously being a drummer, it's important to me. Most of it's pretty straightforward stuff. I'll show you some of the Antelope Audio plugins I really like, and we'll just hopefully make this thing sound better. So let's dive in with the drums, and I'll talk you around the mix, how I've set things up, how I lay things out, my kind of philosophies on drums and all that sort of stuff. We're going to start with the kick drum because that seems a fairly logical place to go. I tend to think of the drums as a whole instrument, and certainly if I've got multiple microphones on one drum, like I have with the kick drum, I'm not going to bother processing each one separately, because the fact of the matter is they're one instrument. So what I've done is created a kick bus, and you can have a quick listen to that. We have a kick in, a kick out, and a sub kick, like a reverse speaker, if you like. And I'm using 2 Antelope Audio effects processors. So first of all, we're hitting the VEQ 4K Black. Now, we all know what it's supposed to be, and it's doing that amazing drum thing that British console EQs do. And what you'll find is that, again, I treat the drums as a whole instrument. I want them to sound cohesive and locked together. So what I've done is I've pretty much used this EQ across all the tracks, all the microphone channels for the drums. You can see how I've set it up. Let's bypass all of this lot. It's all there, it just needs some help. And then to bring out some of the punch, a classic FET A76 compressor.
And times by 10.
Yes, that compressor is hitting that kick drum really hard, but I like what it's doing, especially then when you bring it into the context of the full drum kit mix. You're getting the kind of the tonality of the drum back through the overheads and all the other mics that are in place. I'm treating the kick drum quite hard to get that real punch. The next most important element in the kit, of course, is the snare drum. Now, this was recorded using an Antelope Audio Edge Note microphone. and it's a modelling microphone, so I'm using the Hamburg 40 mic model. And if I solo up the snare drum, you can hear just how much difference the mic model makes, not necessarily to the tonality of the drum, but to the off-axis bleed, the off-axis sound changes massively. And that's, to me, where an SM57 doesn't score highly. But being able to choose your bleed, if you like, with a different mic works really, really well here. Much better off-axis rejection with the Hamburg 40 model. Now again, we have two processors in play on the snare drum top. We have our old friend, the VEQ 4K Black, and an A76 compressor. Let's bypass those and show you what they're doing. It's all starting to come together to form a cohesive drum mix. Now, again, I want the drums to sound like one instrument. You know, they're played by one person as one instrument, therefore they should be treated that way. And we've got VEQ 4K Blacks on the snare bottom, on the hi-hat, 5 toms. Yes, I know 5 toms, but hey, it's excessive, I know. And I think what I did here was just created, you know, a good sounding tom patch, if you like, a good EQ curve, and then copied it to all 5 of the drums because I want it to sound the same. I want it to sound just like a deeper version of the original. And again. Now all in. Again, VEQ 4K Black on the overheads, both the same. I want to get that kind of cohesive stereo image from the overheads, and using the same processor, the same EQ channel strip effectively, gives me that kind of virtual console effect. Now, for the drum bus, I'm using the Comp 4K bus. And again, we know how it's supposed to sound. We know the kind of glue effect that these compressors, these legendary compressors, have on a drum bus. So I'm not hitting it hard. Threshold set about right. The attack is way back, which is a 2-to-1 ratio. The automatic release on a bus compressor for me just works for drums. Take a listen. Just taming those transients and kind of, say, gluing it all together, which I really like. So that's the drums pretty much. Say in the context of the mix, it works really, really well. Not a great deal of processing going on. Now, the big element going on here is the unsung hero, the reverb. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm using the built-in reverb from the Antelope Audio Orion Studio, my main interface for this session. Now, up until now, what we've been doing is using the new Synergy Core native plugins, the native plugin platform. Think of this as Antelope Audio coding their plugins to run on your host-based machine, like any kind of AAX, VST, AU plugin. Now, with the reverb, what I'm doing is I'm actually creating an insert, a real-time insert in Pro Tools, just to go out to insert 3 and 4. In the Antelope Audio Orion Studio control panel, I'm routing from Computer Play 3 and 4 to the input of mixer 1 and 2. Now, the mixers in this case can be used for foldback, for configuring different input monitoring stages, for the different headphone outputs or line outputs, whatever you want. And the really cool thing about the Antelope Audio configuration matrix, the routing matrix, is that you can route anything to anywhere in triplicate if you need to, and run it through the mixers, have the mixers control things. Really, really handy. But in this case, Mixer 1 has a really cool reverb processor called Auraverb built in. And it's Auraverb that I'm using as the main reverb for this session. I could be using a reverb processor which is being handled by my Mac CPU in this case. But what I'm doing is I'm actually using the reverb that's built into the DSP of the Orion Studio, which is quite cool because it kind of releases some of that pressure from my computer. And as we know, reverb and kind of delay line effects are quite thirsty. So the main reverb for this session is actually being dealt with by Auraverb, and it sounds great. It's really nice and transparent. I've kind of dialed in a kind of a chambery, a short chamber kind of sound, I think, and it sounds really nice. So I'm using real-time inserts just to get out into the DSP platform and then coming back in. I'm also using the Synergy Core native plugin, the VEQ1A, to shape the returning reverb, rolling out some bottom end and boosting a little bit of 8K just to give me some sheen and some shine to that reverb. And it sounds really, really nice. Back to the track and let's listen to some bass. It does go on a bit. And again, just processing it very simply twice. I love the Opto 2A on bass. Again, the hardware edition, the real thing if you like, does some really nice stuff for bass, and I'm quite happy with how that works. And I'm using the VEQ 4K Pink to really shape what's going on. So I'll bypass both of these and you can hear how it sounds. Yes, I know there's a level mismatch. I'm using the Opto 2A to bring the level up. Rolling out quite a lot of the top end. I don't want the attack. I don't want that kind of bite coming through. I just want the bass doing what the bass should be doing, providing a bottom end.
That much. Then how long until
Classic case of you don't hear the bass until you mute it, then you miss it. That's kind of where I'm going with this particular track. Next up, we have acoustic piano, or in this case, a sample piano. And I'm not doing very much to it. I'm using the VEQ 4K Brown, which is a slight variation on the 4K Black. It's a different era, slightly different acoustic model, if you like. And one of the things that the guys at Antelope Audio are really hot on is getting really good examples of the hardware to model. Now, there are actually, in the suite, there are 4 different VEQ 4K models. The black, brown, orange, and pink. All have slightly different electronic topology, slightly different tone, slightly different shape of tone, slightly different controls, and the controls work in slightly different ways. But the really cool thing is that they haven't just gone, right, here's the sound in, here's the sound out, and let's create what happens in the middle. What they're actually doing is modeling each stage of the circuit. And that's what I think makes these guys stand out from some of the other recreations of hardware in software, is that they're going in and they're going, right, well, here's the input stage. Let's model that bit. And then that bit talks to the next bit, like the EQ stage. And then let's talk to the next op amp and the next preamplifier and whatever. And to me, at least, that's why these plugins work and feel like the real thing. I'm fortunate enough to have worked on some of these consoles and with some of this hardware, and it just feels like I'm dialing it in on a console, which is great. So here's the piano before. Quite safe and lifeless. Let's dial some fun in.
that much. Then how long until they're part of the family? Take this brain inside my head. Fight.
Okay, synthesizers next. Now, this particular track of Ben's doesn't use a great deal of synths and kind of electronic recreation nastiness, but I wanted to find a patch that worked really well, and we were diving around for some stuff, and this patch sounds great, but until we really got busy with it, with some tone shaping, it was just a bit too much. And the movement in the track works really well with the groove. So what I've done is I've basically rolled out a whole load of the bottom end, a whole load of the middle, using the VEQ 55A. Again, we know what it's supposed to be. So let me play that back and you can hear what it's doing. Adding loads of extra top end brightness and kind of almost another harmonic.
Let's rule the world with gentle speech and metal shells.
The other synth element in this track is this kind of fast arpeggiator, and this is really cool. Very Muse-esque, dare I say it. And again, it's a very full bandwidth sound. So what I wanted to do was dive in with this baby. This is the Blonder Tongue audio baton. Now, I've never seen one of these in real life. They do exist. It was a real thing. I believe from the sort of 50s and 60s era. Now, each band of EQ is controlled by this kind of wheel thing. And each band has its own amplification section. So it sounds really cool. And the more you dial it in, the more grungy it gets and the more kind of overtones and harmonics it adds. It's a really cool piece of kit. So let's have a listen to how that's tweaking the tone of this arpeggiato part. Just helping give some real top-end interest to the whole mix. Really, really cool sound. And I love the way this thing works. It's simple to dial in. It's one of those cases of roll it in. If you like what it's doing, roll more in. If you don't like what it's doing, roll it out. So there's some really cool stuff going on in the guitar parts, but they weren't recorded by me, and I think I would have made more of them out of the box. So we've got quite a lot to work with, but quite a lot to do. Have a listen to this simple chord part. Not very inspiring. So what I've done, first things first, I've put the Filtech Mark III EQ on there to make it sound slightly more interesting. That's brightened it up nicely. Now what I've done is added two different plugins to the left and the right. We've gone with the Space Flanger on the left and the BBD Chorus on the right. And these two on this guitar part just add some stereo variation. You know, they're subtle. It's not wah, 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 wah territory, but I think it sounds really cool. So let's have a listen to these. I like what these are doing. It makes it a much more interesting guitar sound, and that's got to be a good thing. Also, I've been able to sculpt using the Filtech to get the bottom end of the guitar parts out of the way. You know, we don't need it in the mix. So the next guitar part is an accompaniment to the chorus, and we've got a really heavy vibrato effect baked in. I love that. But it's just a bit too forward. So what I've done is applied the marble white auto wah. And this has just done some magic to this thing. Have a listen.
We've made anytime.
Really, really cool. I like how it's pushed the guitars back in the mix. They're still quite loud, but they feel further back. It's not the most prominent part, it's not the most important part, but it is a bit of interest, which is nice. So finally for guitars, we've got this big kind of anthemic harmony section towards the end. And these need some work to my ears. So let's have a listen. It's not the greatest guitar tone ever. So what we're using is the NEU W492, and this is a really nice, very powerful EQ. So you'll hear, when I kick it in, it's the same setting for both sides. You'll hear exactly what this is doing. It's just night and day difference. And in context, the guitars for this one, you know, it is still a rock, kind of pop rock track, but as soon as you take them out of the mix, you lose all the kind of weight and the pomp, if you like. Let's move on to the lead vocal. After Melodyne, because nobody's perfect, again, I'm going for this kind of trying to make it all sound like it was recorded in one go, in one pass. That's kind of my goal, if you like. Now, I appreciate that these days modern recording isn't done that way, but I want it to sound cohesive. I want it to sound like it's come from the same place. So again, in this case, we're going for the VEQ 4K Black. I'll play the vocal through on its own, and then bring the effects in one at a time.
If computers really run,
let's mute the delays in the vocal.
All our offices and all of our industry, if we trust them all that much,
Just doing a great job of cleaning up the vocal.
Then how long until they're part of the family?
Right, 2 stages of dynamics processing. The Opto 2A, I think, works great on vocals. And then we hit it with the Tube Child 670. Classic tube limiter that, for me, just has that lovely chewy thing that vocals need. And it just sounds gorgeous. So let's have a listen to that, and I'll bring those 2 in.
If computers really run all our offices and all of our industry, if we trust them all that much, then how long until they're part of the family? Take this brain inside my head.
Just helps it sit on top of the mix a bit better. Let's add the vocal effects in there. We've got 3 different effects on the vocal. Now, the aura verb is our kind of master reverb. It's our room verb, if you like. I wanted the track to sound like it was recorded in one pass, in one go. And this is basically our room mics, our real life reverb, if you like. So everything's running through it. Yes, it can mean it gets a little bit busy, a bit of a dirty reverb, but that's what the VEQ 1A is doing, cleaning up the bottom end. We've then got 2 delays, 2 effects delays, 1 a thickener and 1 an actual kind of repeat delay. But it's pretty straightforward stuff. I haven't done anything overly clever. I'm only using stock Pro Tools delays. Nothing overly flash, if you like.
If computers really run all our offices and all of our industry, if we trust them all that much,
Here's our thickener.
then how long until they're part of the family? Take this brain inside my head, find its power and times by 10. Take all the lessons that we have learned and run.
So a couple, 3 more mix elements to go on this one. We've got an effects vocal in here, which is literally just a one-liner. And again, the line kind of sells itself, really.
Digital speech, digital speech,
Digital speech. So I wanted to make it sound a bit gritty, a bit nasty, a bit gnarly. So up until now, we've been running Synergy Core native or host-based plugins. What we're going to use now is the Antelope bridge, the AFX to DAW bridge, in order to get access to the FPGA and the DSP that's within the Orion Studio. And in this case, we're going to use a plugin that's not yet available for Synergy Core native, but is part of the Synergy Core DSP platform. And this is called Instinct Synergy. Basically, it's one of the greatest kind of bit crusher, distorty, overdrive boxes I've ever heard. And it does a really cool thing to this vocal.
digital speech, digital speech.
Nasty. And then all we're going to do is use the VEQ STU098, which have only just been ported over to Synergy Core Native, just to get rid of some of the bottom end and clean this up without actually cleaning it up.
Digital speech, digital speech.
I really like what that's doing. And in the context of the lead vocal line, you can see there's automation there to knock out the lead vocal and just give us that really powerful kind of extra line, kind of a comedy line, a comedy throw-in line, if you like.
When will the robots rule the world? Digital speech and metal shirts.
Let's run it again.
It's us soon. When will the robots rule the world? Digital speech and metal shirts.
It's one little tiny line, or 2 words in fact, just to lift that second chorus. Right. For one of Benjamin's tracks, this song doesn't have many backing vocal parts. Usually we're looking at 30 or 40 backing vocal tracks, just because we divide them up into blocks of 8. So chorus will be one set, the harmony vocals for a lead line, the pre-chorus bridge will all have their own chunks of 8, 10, 12 BVs, depending on how high or low we can be bothered to put them in. But in this case, we've just got 4 BVs, and it's quite a nice little 4-part kind of quartet going on. Let's find a spot where we can dive in. And again, I haven't got overly clever and started processing each thing separately. What's the point? We want to apply one tonality to all the vocals, so I'm just using the BAE 1073. It's a classic vintage sounding mic pre and EQ, and it's doing exactly the job I want it to do in this case.
Rule the world.
Take it out.
We've been told.
Way too much bottom end for BVs.
Made anytime soon.
Just doing exactly what I want to do. Get rid of all the bottom end. It's pushing the BVs back nicely with the loss of the bottom end, and it sounds cracking in the mix.
Rule the world. When will we see what we've been told? When will we work for creatures that we've made? Anytime soon. When will the robots
Okay, we're moving to the final mix element, and that is my master bus. Now, depending on where the track is going next and what the track's being used for, I'll have 3, 4 elements on the mix bus. In this case, I've got 2 extra plugins, which are purely there. So one, I don't pop anything ready for YouTube or ready for the internet, if you like. And one, just to make sure I'm not overcooking anything going out into the outside world. I trust my monitors, I trust my mixing environment, but a visual reference sometimes can be helpful. But in this case, we also have 2 dynamics processors. We have the rather lovely BAE 1073 DCF, and we also have the TubeChild 670. Now, neither of these processors are slamming. I don't like that kind of slammed dynamic sound. I don't like the pumped compressor thing. They're both there for their own reasons. The 1073 DCF is kind of being my let's get the level up and control everything and get it to the right place. The TubeChild 670 is there for flavor. It's not doing very much. We're tickling it. So have a listen to how it sounds without, and then we'll jump in with. So there you go. We're using the kind of 3 eras of Antelope Audio plugin development. We're using the insert effects running our reverb directly from the Orion Studios DSP and FPGA platform. We're using AFX to DAW, the software to hardware bridge facility, to one, enable us to use some plugins that haven't been ported over into Synergy Core Native yet, but also to free up some of the power from this machine and run some effects plugins on the Orion Studio. There's lots of processing power in those boxes, so why not use it? But it also has to be said that, I'm running on a 2022 M1 MacBook Pro, and I'm really just tickling what this machine can do with the number of plugins I've got. I'm not a great believer in machine gunning plugins all over a mix because, quite frankly, if we get it right on the way in the first case, to me, that's half the battle. Get a reasonably good static mix. There's a bit of automation to do on this. We need to ride those vocals a little bit because we're losing a couple of syllables on some of the lines, but nothing tragic. There's not a great deal going on, really. We've got some EQ on some channels, we've got a bit of compression and limiting going on in a few places, but nothing major. But you can hear the track's gone from being, a well-recorded track to hopefully now a well-mixed track ready for mastering. Perhaps if I was going to mastering, I might pull off the BAE and the TubeChild from the master bus, depending on what my mastering engineer might be saying. But for you guys out there in YouTube land, you're hearing the mix with the BAE 10 DCF and with the TubeChild, both of which I think sound pretty damn awesome in this case. So I really hope you've enjoyed that. We're going to dive over into the Q&A now. Thanks to Justin and the team at Sonic Scoop for inviting me on for this MixCon 2023 session. But for now, my name's James Ivey, and I'll see you all in the Q&A.